Good afternoon. I'm Brett Ruffle, editor of Canadian Poultry. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on safeguarding the poultry industry, biosecurity, and the One Health approach. Safeguarding the environment is critical for protecting producers and their flocks. It's especially important this year in the middle of a pandemic. Joining us to discuss this important topic are Dr. Lucas Pantaleone and Chris van der Kooi. They're both from the biosecurity firm Ogena Solutions. Lucas is a veterinarian and a biosecurity expert. He's worked with Ogena as a veterinary technical advisor for 9 years. And Chris has over 30 years of agriculture and biosecurity experience. He's made several contributions to CFIA National Biosecurity Standards Development Programs, and he's been working with Ogena since 2015. We encourage you to submit questions throughout the webinar. Chris and Lucas will be happy to answer them following this presentation. Please note that a recording of this webinar will be emailed 24 hours after the live event. Now I'll pass it over to Chris and Lucas to get us started.
Thanks very much, Brett. It's Chris here. I just wanted to round out the fact that Ogena Solutions is a biosecurity-focused infection prevention company, and we provide effective and friendly, environmentally friendly products. We also have air purifiers that cleanse the air of pathogens, disinfectant dispensing equipment. We assist customers with protocol development and do staff training. We have a warehouse and office in Stony Creek, an additional warehouse in Kitchener, and we work with about 35 distributors from coast to coast across Canada. So I had the luxury of seeing Lucas's presentation already. I think it's pretty cool. And Lucas, I'll turn it over to you. Hopefully the weather's nice in Kentucky today.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for the introduction. And yeah, beautiful day in Kentucky today. Sunny and about, I don't know, maybe 55 degrees. So I was actually rehearsing my presentation outside this afternoon. So hopefully the neighbors get a little bit of an education. So as the title portrays here, we are going to be talking a little bit about biosecurity and the importance of the One Health approach. And I wanted to start by maybe mentioning why do I think the science of infection prevention, biosecurity, and studying infectious diseases is an interesting science. And one of the ways that I think is interesting is because it deals a lot with the human behavior. And as veterinarians and farmers, we need to deal with these. And as we see today, in the midst of a pandemic, human behavior is playing a big role in controlling and worsening the pandemic. So how we behave in the midst of infectious diseases is something important. The other thing that I think it is important in this context is the technology and the advances in technology. A lot of those technological advances are going to help us control and early detect some of these infectious diseases. However, some of the things that we have done with technology and, for example, with the ease of air travel, maybe have contributed for the disease to be able to spread much easier. And the other thing about this topic is that basically you never get bored because there's always something new. It is a very dynamic field. There's always changing. And as we'll see, there's a lot of interaction between different disciplines that need to come together to tackle some of the challenges that we are going through today. This, as you can see, is a picture from Earth, from space. And what I wanted to portray on this picture is that from space, you cannot see international borders. And that is the same for infectious diseases. Infectious diseases do not respect international borders. And this is depicted here with this picture that shows you air travel, and probably what air travel used to be before the pandemic started. But you can see here that with the advances in air travel, today we could travel from one end of the world to another in less than 24 hours. And there has been a lot of more biosecurity events because of these. And what has contributed to these biosecurity events or the emergence of infectious diseases is what we call the 4Ts: the increase in travel, tourism, trade, and transportation. So with goods, animal transportation, and people traveling, disease as well go across international borders very easily. And I'm sure everybody is familiar with the term of, and they know what a zoonotic disease is. Therefore, we're not going to go into very many details with these, but we know that diseases can go between humans and animals. And today, if we look back at some of the emergent infectious diseases that have been novel and they have affected humans, about 75% of those emergent infectious diseases have been of zoonotic origin. That means that they have been originated in an animal. And remember Ebola a few years back. This caused an epidemic in Africa, likely was contained to that area, but that had an origin in the animal kingdom. And today we are dealing with coronavirus. You in Canada have experienced the SARS-1 epidemic that was originated in a bat reservoir. Then the emergence of the MERS or Middle East coronavirus, that is also a respiratory virus that mainly is localized in the Middle East. And today we are dealing with the SARS-CoV-2 that causes the COVID-19 epidemic. All have been originated in an animal reservoir. And this is what Kentucky looks on a day like today, or on a spring day. You know, Kentucky is the horse capital of the world, and there are a lot of horses and fancy farms around here. And this is a picture of broodmares grazing in a nice field on a spring day. So I wanted to go through two concepts that I think are important, and sometimes they're used interchangeably, and those are the concepts of infection prevention. Infection prevention, when we think about infection prevention, we think about sort of trying to implement measures to prevent the spread of an infectious disease in what we would call an open population. For example, a backyard chicken operation, where you have different animals coming at different times, coming and going, right? So implementing measures here to try to prevent the spread of the disease, and of course, trying to prevent the entry of the disease. But when we think about large poultry operations, we think a lot in terms of biosecurity, and that is really measures that we put in place in order to try to minimize the chances for the disease to enter this type of all-in, all-out operations. So there's a little bit difference between a difference between when we apply biosecurity and when we apply infection prevention, but both can be applied, you know, in parallel as well. So, for example, this is something that we do at poultry farms in order to prevent the entry of a disease into the poultry house brought in, for example, by a great fomite, which is people. So therefore, people will use this sort of bench system to change shoes and come in with clean shoes into the poultry house. And as farmers and veterinarians, we are very good and have learned over the many years and a lot of the outbreaks that we have been through to control and try to prevent the entry of diseases into our animal population. But today, because of the situation that we are in with the coronavirus pandemic, we have to adapt and learn about how we are going to apply infection prevention and protect the farm team and the farm worker. That is so essential for us veterinarians and farmers in agriculture to continue to produce healthy foods for the consumers and to feed the world. When I think about biosecurity and infection prevention, I think about three pillars and all the strategies that we put in place in order to prevent or minimize the effects of infectious diseases in these three pillars. The first pillar will be the animal, the second one will be the human, and the third one, the environment. And today is actually One Health Day. So what better day to have this talk with you guys on One Health Day? And I wanted to introduce this concept that I'm sure you are familiar with it, and talks about how closely interrelated the health of humans, animals, and environment is. And as you can see, and I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, a lot of the human emergent diseases came from animals. Therefore, that talks of the close relationship between animals and humans from health and disease. Therefore, One Health also are the strategies that we put together and how we come together and collaborate in order to promote health in humans, animals, and the environment. And this concept is key because it talks about collaboration and bringing different disciplines together to solve some of these complex problems that we deal with, either at the level of animal health or at the level of human health, or both. And when we think about biosecurity and infection disease prevention, we need to think about these subject as a One Health and approach it as a One Health. Therefore, have human, environment, and animal all together and bring different people to collaborate to solve this problem. So my wife was born and raised in Zimbabwe, and this is a picture of a trip that she took a couple of years ago, and she is having her tea in the morning, watching some rhinos in a rhino reserve that they went with her family. So beautiful part of the world if you've never been to Zimbabwe. So I like to say that biosecurity is in our hands. And yeah, we are dealing with complex problems and there are difficult times, but I think we can learn and work together to break through some of those complexities. And I wanted to touch on some key points regarding biosecurity. The first point that I wanted to highlight is the fact of risk and the importance of risk, and to evaluate risk, for which you guys on the other side are very familiar with these, and having risk assessments, for example, on where the poultry farm will be built, how close to the road, how close to backyard poultry, and that will depend on how those biosecurity risks are, if they're minimum, medium, or high. So you're very familiar with how to do risk assessment from the animal side. But now we have at different places in the in the supply chain, we have to evaluate the risk and protect the human aspect of the equation, and how we assess and minimize the risk, in this case, to protect workers in a processing plant from getting COVID-19. And the same had happened at the level of the farm. How do we protect our farm team so we can continue to provide an essential service? Another aspect of biosecurity that is very important is that it is a proactive science. It is always said that being proactive is better than being reactive. So you have to really look into the future and invest in preventative measures today in order to protect you, for what could happen in the future. And I think this is, and many people also think that this is what we fail the most around the world in being prepared for this pandemic, because we were not really invested in things to tackle this huge problem that we are in today. The other important aspect about biosecurity is that, yeah, true, there are guidelines that we can follow and we can adhere to, but ultimately, all these guidelines and the biosecurity protocol and SOP will be tailored, or needs to be tailored to each particular farm, because each particular farm has different needs. Important as well is that once we have a biosecurity protocol, that doesn't mean that that's written in stone, because we always will have to change directions and adapt to different things that could be happening because of new emergent infectious diseases in animals or in humans, as we are experiencing today with the pandemic. We have had to adapt, not only to continue to protect animals that we care for from infectious diseases, but also protect the humans. And biosecurity really is a team sport. We cannot play these individually. And also, if somebody within the team does not respect the rules, that then could put into jeopardy the whole biosecurity system. So it must be a team sport. An aspect about biosecurity that sometimes we overlooked is education, and how we can educate veterinarians, farmers, and the workers within the farm. It is important also, as we have experienced during the pandemic, and understand that a lot of the workers coming to farms are from foreign countries, and they do not speak English or French at all. So therefore, it's important to be able to communicate in their language so they can really understand how we can prevent infectious diseases and implement biosecurity at that farm. Because it has been shown time and time again that if you have education and you educate your team, your workers, then compliance will increase. So education is key to success. So in Kentucky, it's not all about horses. We are actually the state that has the most amount of beef cattle east of the Mississippi River. So there are a lot of beef cattle here. And these are my twin daughters trying to make friends with a calf at a walk that we took. So when we think about infectious diseases, right, and they can go all the way from an outbreak that could happen at an individual farm to a pandemic. that could affect animals and humans, ultimately having an economic impact and loss of life, either animal or human lives. This is a scenario that we are becoming very familiar with in today's age. So if you look at around the world, there's about 20% of the livestock and poultry production that is lost because of animal disease. And it is important to point out that animal protein is an essential nutrient for humans around the world. So healthy animals are connected to healthy people. And around the world, 1.3 billion people depend on livestock and poultry. So they have something to do with, they work in this field. And especially 600 million people around the world, and these are located probably in the poorest countries, truly depend on livestock and poultry for their daily survival. In the United States, the agriculture industry is valued or produces about $165 billion per year. In Canada, it produces about $111 billion of their GDP. So as you can see, they're huge industries. And animal agriculture is key for food security, income generation, and economic growth. And this is in developed and middle-income countries as well. So we need to protect animal agriculture from infectious diseases by implementing proper biosecurity. And as you can see in this graph talks about influenza. And influenza is the typical disease, viral disease that has been able to jump to different species and affect different species, not only poultry, but humans and pigs and wild animals. In the United States in 2015, we had a pretty large outbreak of high-path avian influenza that cost the poultry industry $3.3 billion to contain and remediate. And as you can see on these graphs, the broiler export in 2015 took a pretty big hit compared to 2014 because of the outbreak of high-path avian influenza. And still, by 2019, the industry has not recovered the prior export numbers. In Canada, there was an outbreak of high-path avian influenza in British Columbia in 2004 that led to the mass euthanasia of 17 million birds, costing $380 million Canadian. So as you can see, these type of diseases have had and will continue to have huge impacts in the industry. Shifting a little bit and in the spirit of One Health to the human side, this is a picture of 1918 Spanish flu outbreak, which ended up costing the world economy about $18 trillion, killing about 50 million people around the world. Today, we are in a similar situation with this virus that is called coronavirus. that had the ability to jump from an animal species and be able to adapt quite well to the humans and be able to transmit from human to human. It's been estimated by a recent article in a medical journal that this pandemic will cost the United States $16 trillion by the time we're done. And I don't know you, but I couldn't picture what $16 trillion really looked like, or how much will that be. So you have here a picture of this $16 trillion pile up, and you can see it's as big as a football field and almost as tall as the Statue of Liberty. So when I think about the situation that we are in today with the pandemic, I like to be optimistic, and I'm hoping that we are going to learn and be able to do things different in the future about how we tackle infection prevention and biosecurity in the future. And one of the key aspects of these that I hope that we learn is portrayed by this graph. And as this graph shows you, or tries to show you, what happens with zoonotic diseases. So zoonotic diseases that come from animals. And as you can see on the first curve, you have an animal disease, right? That's where it first show up, in animals. And animals will then show clinical disease. But then it will jump into the human population, and the humans will show clinical signs, and the humans will seek medical care. What is interesting about these is, if you look at the solid black line, it talks about the cost of controlling an outbreak. And you can see that as you shift into more and more into the human population, and the humans start to seek medical care, the cost increase exponentially. Therefore, it's key to try to tackle and diagnose and stop these diseases at the animal level when they first show up in animals, rather than waiting all the way up here and be in the situation that we are today, where we are way up there in the curve of how costly controlling this pandemic will be. So I'm hoping that in the future, we are going to continue to invest in trying to detect these diseases early. So as probably everybody else in Canada, we cannot travel very far from home. So my family and I have been trying to take local trips, especially during the summer holidays for my daughter. So we've been exploring Kentucky, and really it's a beautiful state that we haven't been able to explore yet. So we have been doing that a lot. And this is a picture of the Daniel Boone National Forest, which is about 2.5 hours from our house in the south of Kentucky. And they have these beautiful formations, these beautiful forests. And we tend to go and rent a cabin and stay there for a few nights and go and do some good hiking. So it's a good way to travel local. Okay, so we know that the supply chain for animal protein is very complex, and we have seen that this pandemic has, especially at the beginning, severely disrupted the supply chain. Therefore, we have such a complex supply chains that any disease outbreak at any point, either in humans or in animals, could, as we very well learn, disrupt the supply chain, leading to you know, in it having an effect in how we can supply food to the consumer and how we can process efficiently the either the birds or the swine or the cattle in our farms. So we know that infectious diseases are contagious, right? And they can affect it can enter at any point in the supply chain. Therefore, we need to understand, and that's what I wanted to show you with this little animated graph, how if we have an infected or colonized host, that would be an animal or a or a bird, and just in case you guys don't know about the term colonize, basically colonize is somebody that is infected but is not showing clinical signs. And an infected person or animal is somebody is infected and showing clinical signs. So therefore we have a host or we have a contaminated environment. And if we have the amount of virus or bacteria that in that host or in that environment, how does it get to a susceptible host or population? So today we're going to discuss two main ways. One is the airborne, so the aerosols. And we are very familiar with these in poultry because avian influenza and how fast it could move even with wind from poultry house to poultry house. But also today, we know that we are in the middle of a pandemic with the coronavirus, which is a respiratory virus that is mainly transmitted via aerosols or droplets, therefore airborne. And the other way is fomites. And by fomites, we mean any inanimated object, like a vehicle or instruments that we use, but also people. And people are good at transmitting diseases from place to place, and mainly they do that via hands and shoes. So if we have the right dose, we can reach a susceptible host or a susceptible population via airborne or fomites that in turn they could become colonized or infected. So it is important for me to show you these because if we know how diseases are transmitted, then we can put in place measures via infection prevention or biosecurity to try to limit or prevent the spread of a particular infectious disease. And that's what we do. We know that people could bring diseases into swine farms or into poultry. So what we do is shower in, shower out, change clothes because clothes, shoes, and hands, even hair, could be a fomite. Therefore, leave your clothes on one side, take a shower, put clean clothes and shoes, go into the poultry. That's something that, we are used to in animal agriculture sectors such as poultry and swine in order to prevent disease in animals. And trailers, transport trailers, especially, I'm more familiar with the swine industry and how they have identified the fact that all the movement of swine across borders, like across the US and Canada or across the US, how these trailers could be a fomite for bringing diseases into the farm. So it is important to really have these trailers clean and disinfected. And any vehicles, coming into farms could be a fomite as well. So it is important to apply the proper disinfectant. And you can see here a foamer that we have at Ogena that foams really well the disinfectant. Therefore, the advantage of foaming is that really sticks to the tire in this case, and it will stay there for the hopefully for the contact time, but also will help to stick to it and be able to kill some potential pathogens. And also we clean and disinfect our poultry houses. Here again, some of the Orgena products foaming through a power washing system. And you can see here on the walls how this foam really sticks to the wall, therefore it doesn't run down on the vertical surfaces and is able to stay there for the required contact time, which is key. But also, we can't forget, and I think this is what I'm going to concentrate for the rest of the talk, that biosecurity has a very important component, and one of the three pillars is the human side, and the health and safety of our team is key, more so in the times that we are living today with COVID-19, because as I mentioned, we are dealing with a respiratory pathogen that can spread either from sick people or people that they are colonized, not showing any clinical signs, but they could spread the virus via aerosol, via speaking, sneezing, coughing, singing, etc., to other susceptible people. So what do we do? How do we protect our people? So one of the key things is to wear a mask. And this is very important and something that I am, you could say, very passionate about, because you need to wear the mask properly. Wearing your mask on your forehead is not going to protect you. Remember that this is a respiratory virus that comes out through the respiratory system, nose and mouth, and also enters through the respiratory system. Okay, so you need to cover your nose and your mouth. The other thing that we do, and we had to adapt to work it differently now in our farms, is to maintain distance, social distance. And that comes from the fact that by being at a certain distance, there's less chances for the aerosol to reach your respiratory tract. Combining proper wear of mask with social distances significantly decrease the chances for people to get COVID-19. And the other thing that a lot of people are talking about now is the ventilation aspect and the environmental air exchanges through a room, either a lunchroom or a bathroom or a kitchen or an office. And natural ventilation would be ideal. And now architects are starting to talk about, be able to open windows in the office to let natural air coming in. I understand that, areas in the world where weather in the winter, this is not possible, but either it could be natural ventilation or mechanical ventilation, but ventilation to have proper air exchanges through a room to dilute some of these aerosols that are being released by potentially people that are being colonized by coronavirus in this case, is key to minimize transmission. And you can do even things where you don't have proper ventilation or you cannot open the windows, sort of these homemade air filters that they can be put in place. And, there's some evidence that they can help to clean that air a little bit better. Or you can go to some of the more advanced technologies. For example, this is a graph of an advanced photocatalytic technology and how they work. And basically what this technology does is generate, they have a UV lamp internally within the device that the UVs internally hit a photocatalyst or a titanium plate. And this activates this titanium and releases ions into the environment. And those ions, what they'll do is they bind to bacteria or pollutants. And what they do is they destroy bacteria and pollutants. And this is interesting because these new devices, they actually, is one that we're working with Orgena that is being patented that does not generate any ozone. And as you very well know, ozone in a room, especially in a closed room, with people in it could be very harmful. So the fact that you can generate ions to kill some of these bacteria and viruses in the environment with no ozone is very important. And this is how it works. You know, you have different ions that go and find viruses, bacteria on surfaces and in the air, and basically inactivates it. Another important thing, and we as fomites, that we are very good fomites, you know, with our hands and dirty hands, is important to educate people about the importance of hand washing. And as we are probably tired of reading and seeing, hand washing is not like five-second hand washing. You know, it has to be proper. You have to wash all the surfaces of your hands in order to remove the bacteria and viruses and organic material from your hands properly and from all surfaces of your hands. It is also key that, especially in harsh winters like you guys have up there in Canada, that your hands, you maintain the health of your hands. Therefore, using soaps that they are gentle to your hands. So because if your hands crack, then what's going to happen is some bacteria and organic material and potentially virus could live in those cracks and kind of, you know, more difficult to get rid of it. So, you know, out of Gin, again, we have some hand cleaner that is being combined with moisturizer. That way it does not crack your hands and maintain your skin health. And high touch areas like doorknobs or desk, keyboards, telephones, it is important to maintain these areas clean and disinfected. And you hear me well, I say cleaned and disinfected. It is important to first clean the surface and then apply a disinfectant. And we know that, for example, the coronavirus and COVID-19 could live on some surfaces for, you know, hours to a few days. So potentially some of these high touch areas, if somebody goes and touches with a hand, contaminates their hand, and then goes and touches their face, they could potentially acquire COVID-19 via that route. So cleaning first and then disinfecting is key. And some important aspects of disinfection are that, of course, you need to clean to remove organic matter because organic matter could interfere with the disinfectant. You need to make sure you use a disinfectant that has the proper spectrum, so that is labeled for what you want to kill, and make it at the proper dilution according to the label, and also follow and read the label in order to meet the contact time required for that disinfectant to disinfect. The other interesting thing about disinfection is how you apply it, right? We talked a little bit about foaming, but also spray application is important. And the droplet size is important because what comes out of that sprayer, if you have droplets that are too big, what they can do is do not distribute evenly through the surface. And also big droplets, what they tend to do is bounce off surfaces, and instead of kind of bind to the surfaces, they just drop down, especially on vertical surfaces. The other interesting thing, and I'll show you a little graph, is the pressure drop on the equipment that is actually applying the disinfectant, the sprayer. And also how the disinfectant is distributed, and the pattern of distribution will be affected by the equipment and the droplet size. So, you know, these are pretty fancy and advanced battery operated sprayers that have the advantage of having a pressure that is equal throughout the application, is maintained throughout the application. So for example, if you would buy one of those, you know, inexpensive sprayers out of the feed store, the pressure likely during the application is going to do this. Therefore, the application of that disinfectant is not going to be uniform, and really you're going to waste a lot of product. When you apply disinfectant or through a battery operated device or backpack, as you saw the picture, either you can be on a high pressure or on a low pressure, but the key is that the pressure is maintained because it has a battery, and that helps to maintain and apply the disinfectant uniformly throughout the application process. And another advanced technology that I'm very excited about is these electrostatic sprayers, that basically what they do is they apply a positive charge to the disinfectant coming out of the nozzle, and then that positive charge will bind, that's charged particles will go and bind to the negatively charged surfaces. So therefore, again, here you have a more uniform disinfectant application. And I'll show you a few comparisons. We are used to, as they are in human care, healthcare, for people areas like receptions or offices or lunchrooms, to use spray bottle and wipe. But if you use either a battery operated backpack or a Victory backpack or a handheld electrostatic sprayer, you can see that within 1 hour you can cover up to 24,000 square feet compared to 3,000 with spray and wipe. The same is when you use this type of devices, either a battery operated or an electrostatic sprayer, the amount of water that you use and the amount of disinfectant that you use is much less. So you potentially invest in some of these technologies up front, but you decrease the amount of disinfectant that you use to treat some of these areas. And ultimately, you need the labor that is needed for cleaning and disinfection in disinfecting offices and high-touch areas is much less and much quicker compared to a wipe and a spray bottle. So to wrap up, I know this is complex. Biosecurity is complex. We are in challenging times right now because of the pandemic. We had the added complexity that not only we need to protect our animals that we are care for, but also we need to protect our farm workers in order to be able to continue to operate. So I think it is a challenging time, but I'm optimistic that we're going to get through. We're going to learn from these times, and we're going to come out of the other side better. But we need to continue to approach these from the One Health lens and continue to collaborate and work together in order to succeed. Because really we need to protect our agriculture sector, animal agriculture and plant agriculture, from infectious diseases, because it's a significant part of our economy, and also we provide a vital service to provide healthy foods to feed the world. So we can't stick our head in the sand with these type of topics and infectious diseases. We need to embrace it. And as you very well in Canada be familiar with this quote, we need to really embrace biosecurity and infection prevention as and be proactive rather than being reactive, and invest today in things that we can do to prevent disease tomorrow. And with that, I think I'm done. So I am looking forward to this last bit of the conversation that is normally the funnest part, which is where we can interact, and hopefully Chris will come online and help us answer some of your questions. Thank you for listening.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks a lot, Lucas, for that presentation. And we have a few questions that have come in, and you can submit more questions under that questions icon if anyone else has any other questions. So we got the first one is, so what is the one thing I can do to safeguard people working on my farm?
Chris, you want to tackle that, or you want me to?
Go ahead, Lucas. I think we're going to say the same thing when it comes to one thing. I bet I know what you're going to say.
Well, I wish it would be one thing, because then, that would be the magic bullet. And, sadly, there is no one magic bullet. And as you saw on my presentation, there are many things, right? So we need to really have sort of what we call the toolbox, and implement different measures in order to protect the animal, the environment, and the people. Do you have anything to add, Chris?
Yeah, Lucas, spot on. I was going to say it's a combination of protocols and technologies, and of course, everything needs to be tailored to the individual facility, because all farms have their own different personality.
Okay, and we've got another one in. So how important is it for the surface to be clean before disinfecting?
I'll start, and then I'll let Chris fill up a little more details. But as I mentioned there, and I tried to highlight the point, it is it is very important, especially when we get into sort of more the human areas. Sometimes we overlook that because we take some of these commercial disinfectants and don't read the label very well, and don't keep in mind that we need to really clean some of these high touch areas before we can apply a disinfectant. I think we are more used to the cleaning disinfection process in the poultry houses, but on the human side, we need to make sure that we do that as well.
Okay, so what are some of the most promising innovations that have come out with regards to biosecurity? Like, is there any advancements in that field that are the most exciting to you?
I think is there are a lot of technologies coming up, and I think one of the things that I'm passionate and I've been following quite a bit is how we could with some of these precision livestock farming or precision agriculture, how we could potentially detect early some of the disease birds or pigs or cattle, and try to act a little bit earlier, and put into place preventative measures that will lead to less spread of disease and less use of antibiotics and stuff like that. On the animal, on the human side, it really is for preventing COVID-19. There is a whole bunch of low-tech technologies like wearing masks that we can implement together. But these advanced photocatalytic oxidation could be something that would be another tool in the toolbox, especially now that we move into indoor environments, that could help us along with proper ventilation and all the other things that we do and I spoke about, to kind of lower the amount of aerosols that we have in a closed environment.
Okay, and then one listener note, can bales still be used in the winter when things are freezing? Does the temperature impact the effectiveness of the product?
So it's Chris. I think one of the exciting things about Prevail is its versatility. If you've ever run into me at a trade show, you'll hear me sound like a sales guy when I say Prevail is one of those products that checks all the boxes. And yes, the answer is there are cold weather protocols that you can add propylene glycol to Prevail without affecting its efficacy, and it allows you to use it as the temperature starts to go towards 0 and below.
All right, another one. So do you believe foot baths work?
I'll jump on that one, Lucas. I think, and again, we just talked about Prevail. I think since Prevail has come on the scene, it makes the whole proposition of foot baths more attractive than they used to be. Foot baths require a lot of maintenance, and even when you use Prevail, you obviously still need to keep an eye on the foot bath. But yes, I think foot baths can be of use again, and especially when you use one of my favorite disinfectants, and that's Prevail.
Okay, and then, so how do we know when a potentially zoonotic disease emerges in an animal species?
That's for sure for Lucas. He's got way more letters after his name than I do.
Oh, thanks, Chris. So repeat that question, please.
Yeah, it's so how do we know when a potentially zoonotic disease emerges in an animal species?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, and you know, the answer, the short answer to that is surveillance. And basically, surveillance is what you know, we do on the ground, either as farmers or veterinarians, when we detect a disease that does not fit the picture, and call the, you know, or submit samples to the laboratory in order to diagnose what that disease is, and then, you know, quickly implement measures to try to prevent the spread of that disease. So really the boots on the ground and the early diagnostics and constant surveillance of not only animal agriculture, but also wild animals. And that has been going on for, you know, for some time. And I think now after the COVID-19 epidemic, it has been brought to light the importance of constant surveillance of wild animals, especially bat species, for, you know, potentially early detecting diseases that could potentially jump into the human species.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. You can forward any additional questions to webinars@annexweb.com. And another reminder that a recording of this webinar will be emailed 24 hours after the live event. Thanks again for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you very much, Brett.
Thank you, Brett, for having us.
Okay, bye-bye.